Wow, I am very late with this follow-up. Hello everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Back in July of 2020, I made a video discussing mechanics ideas for some of the characters absent from Five Nights at Freddy's AR special delivery, around the time of the 4th of July event. Since that video, the game has received Ballora, the Jacko animatronics, Glitchtrap, and, surprisingly, Golden Freddy. As for how accurate my previous predictions were, the Jacko animatronics were almost exactly what I was expecting. Ballora was slightly different to my previous ideas, but I was completely wrong for Glitchtrap and Golden Freddy. At the end of that video, I suggested the possibility of a second mechanics video, covering all of the characters that I missed.
I may do a part 2 to this video sometime later and discuss ideas for animatronics like JJ the Phantom animatronics Nightmare, Yendo the Pizzeria Simulator animatronics Dreadbear and Grim Foxy.
Well, as I am sure that the opening of this video has indicated, it has unfortunately taken me quite a while to get around to making it, just over half a year in fact. However, I have now finally begun production on it, since it was the winner of the poll that I ran to determine the subject of my next video, once I had finished my already scheduled videos. Originally, I planned to make this video after my already planned videos, those being 20 obscure Transformers characters and 255 Nights at Freddy's facts, but I felt that it would be unfair for voters to have to wait for almost a month, which resulted in this video being moved forward on my schedule. Just in case you have not yet watched part 1, the animatronics that I covered in that video were most of the nightmares, most of the funtimes, the wizards, most of the toys, Shadow Freddy, DD, the plush babies, Lefty, and Golden Freddy. Anyway, without further ado, let's begin part 2 of my ideas for mechanics in Five Nights at Freddy's AR special delivery. The first set of characters that I would like to discuss are the Phantom animatronics, Phantom Freddy, Phantom Mangle, Phantom Balloon Boy, Phantom Foxy, Phantom Puppet, and Phantom Chica. There has been much debate among fans as to whether the Phantoms should be included as skins or as their own characters. Personally, I think that they would work better as distractions, hence why they were relegated to a reluctant honorable mention in my ideas for skins video. Also, I would like to quickly mention that characters who I suggested as skins, such as JJ or Beacon Bonnie, will not be featured in this video. I am sure that everybody is going to be mad that I was able to come up with ideas for the Phantoms and Bidibab, but not for JJ. Although I did manage to work her into another character's mechanics that I will mention later. Getting back to the Phantoms, I think that the best way to include them in special delivery would be to add them as distractions during Remnant Collection, similarly to Preface. My idea is that, while searching for Remnant, each of the Phantoms may appear in the environment around you at random points. In order to avoid them, you will need to shine your flashlight at them until they disappear, similarly to Phantom Freddy in Ultimate Custom Night. However, in order to differentiate them from each other slightly, I think that only half of the Phantoms should be affected by the flashlight, with the other half needing to be looked away from. Just like in Five Nights at Freddy's 3. Since the Phantoms would be unable to trigger a game over, I think that the penalty for being jump scared should be the loss of a random amount of remnant or a random chance of spawning. The next character that I would like to discuss is Nightmare. I really feel that I should have mentioned Nightmare in part 1, since I covered every other Nightmare animatronic in that video. Thankfully though, I did manage to come up with a fairly interesting and unique mechanic for him. My idea for Nightmare ties into the theory that the Nightmares are real animatronics with illusion discs attached. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the novels, illusion discs are devices introduced in the second novel, The Twisted Ones. When attached to an animatronic endoskeleton, they emit a high-pitched frequency that alters a person's perception of the animatronic's appearance. as showcased by the twisted animatronics. After Sister Location and Help Wanted confirmed the setting and animatronics of Five Nights at Freddy's 4 to be real, many fans have speculated that the nightmares are also equipped with illusion discs. This theory will serve as the basis for my idea for nightmares mechanics. My idea is that, when Nightmare haywires, his illusion disc will emit a high-pitched sound and alter his appearance to that of a random animatronic. He will share Springtrap and Toy Bonnie's haywire mechanics, needing to be stared at with white eyes and needing to be avoided with red eyes. An interesting detail that I included is that he will actually appear in his true form during his distraction poses. During a random haywire, his illusion disc will become visible on the left side of his face, as evidenced by a sound effect. Once the illusion disc becomes available, you will need to remove it. Once the disc has been removed, Nightmare will charge at you in his true form, with the shocker being used to deactivate him. While this is fairly similar to the idea that I suggested for DD in part 1, I still think that this would be a very interesting and fitting mechanic for Nightmare. The next character that I would like to discuss is Funtime Chica. My idea for Funtime Chica is very similar to Freddy Fazbear's mechanics, being slightly more aggressive and with an alternative form of interference. In Funtime Chica's case, her camera flashing mechanic from Ultimate Custom Night will return. However, unlike interference, this cannot be counted and will last for up to 10 seconds. The flashing sounds would, of course, be a distraction from more important sounds, such as Funtime Chica's haywires and charges. Speaking of those attributes, the timing on her haywires will be as strict as Baby's haywires, and her charges will be counted by the shocker, just like a majority of the characters in Special Delivery. Also, just in case anybody is wondering, I also think that it would be a great idea to bring back all of the characters' voice actors and actresses, including the characters that I discussed in part 1. The next character that I would like to discuss is Music Man, with one of my more interesting ideas. My idea for Music Man draws a lot of inspiration from Ballora's mechanics, as well as his own mechanics from Ultimate Custom Night. Just like with Ballora, the shocker will be replaced with a noise meter that will increase when you make too much noise, eventually triggering an attack when it is full. However, unlike Ballora, there will be no penalty for staring into Music Man's static. The main premise of the encounter is that you will need to last for 3 minutes, as indicated by an on-screen timer, while making as little noise as possible, similarly to Night 4 of Sister Location. However, while you are trying to stay quiet, several additional characters will appear as distractions, attempting to raise the noise meter. These will include JJ, Bonbon, Bonnet, Helpy, and the plush babies, all smaller animatronics who, with the exception of Helpy, may have difficulty standing as their own characters. Bonbon and Bonnet will attempt to climb over your screen and giggle incessantly, and you must press on a certain part of their bodies to make them fall off of the screen. For Bonbon, it will be his chest button, and for Bonnet, it will be her nose. JJ and the plush babies will randomly appear on the ground and laugh uncontrollably. JJ will be counted by wearing the Freddy mask for a few seconds, and the plush babies will be counted with the flashlight. Finally, Helpy will randomly appear on the ground with an air horn at the ready, eventually blowing it if he is not dealt with in time. You will simply need to press on him in order to deactivate him. Since there will be much more to manage during Music Man's encounter, rather than a noise meter and a tracking meter, there will instead be 2 noise meters, with Music Man attacking when both of them are completely filled. In case you are wondering, the second meter will only begin to fill once the first meter is completely filled. Once 3 minutes have passed, Music Man will decloak and attempt to charge at you, only to be deactivated upon reaching you. The next character that I would like to discuss is Grim Foxy. Although I mentioned in previous videos that Dreadbear and Grim Foxy may be slightly unlikely to make it into Special Delivery, they may still have a chance of being included, especially since the Glamric animatronics have been confirmed for the game. Concerning Grim Foxy, my idea for him is a version of the corn maze from Curse of Dreadbear, but reimagined in augmented reality. While some people may prefer for this to be a mixed reality environment, just like Glitchtrap's factory. I think that mixed reality environments would work best in special delivery with you locked in one position, due to possible technical limitations. Anyway, let's discuss my idea for Grim Foxy. Just like the Jackos, his interference will be replaced with thick clouds of smoke and his haywires will simply be countered by looking away. However, the shocker will be completely removed whenever Grim Foxy charges, during which he will always decloak. A cutout will appear somewhere in the environment, and you must quickly tap on it in order to hide within it until he disappears, mirroring the corn maze. In order to defeat Grim Foxy, you must collect 5 keys, each of which will spawn on the ground at random intervals, as indicated by a sound effect. However, unlike Mangle's parts, there will be no time limit to pick these up. Once all 5 keys have been collected, Grim Foxy will charge at you once again, with you needing to hide inside another cutout. However, once you exit the cutout, Grim Foxy will be deactivated. The next character that I would like to discuss is Molten Freddy. I actually briefly mentioned my idea for his mechanics in my video discussing which characters I would like to see in special delivery, but I will now explain my idea in greater detail in this video. One of Molten Freddy's most defining characteristics is that his lower half is a tangle of wires without any pedal extremities. As a result, I imagine that his charging animation would involve him slithering towards you like a snake, which has also inspired my idea for his main mechanics. My idea is that, due to his excessive amount of wires, Molten Freddy's anim stealth module only affects his upper half, with his lower wires still visibly slithering around you. His lower wires will attempt to constrict you by coiling around you on the ground, while the wires protruding from his shoulders will attempt to latch onto your screen. If either wires remain for too long, Molten Freddy will jump scare you. His lower wires will be repelled with the flashlight, while his upper wires will be deterred by shaking the screen until they detach from you. Molten Freddy will be another animatronic that does not involve the shocker, and he will also share Mangle's mechanic of picking up parts, since he is also almost falling apart at the seams. However, Molten Freddy's parts will be used to construct a net to ensnare him. Once all 3 parts have been collected to form the net, Molten Freddy will slither towards you. When the net is thrown, he will become entangled within it and will eventually fall down in defeat after struggling for a few seconds. Concerning the use of his CPU for other animatronics, I think that they would just have their normal defeat animations but with wires coiled around them. Also, I think that Molten Freddy would have unique defeat animations for when he is equipped with his own CPU and when he is equipped with different CPUs. The next character that I would like to discuss is Orville Elephant. Just like Music Man, my idea for Orville's mechanics also involves another group of characters who may have difficulty standing as their own characters, this time being Trash and the gang. At the beginning of the encounter, Orville will use a magic trick to bring the Trash and the gang to life, referencing his position as a magician. From there, Orville will function like a normal animatronic, leaving residual static and haywiring frequently. However, his creations will actually join in as visual and auditory distractions. Mr. Hugs will occasionally create loud vacuum sounds for a few seconds. Bucket Bob and Number 1 Crate will occasionally block your view and create loud, garbling sounds, as a reference to their behavior in Ultimate Custom Night. And Mr. Can Do and Pan Stan will occasionally appear on the ground and drain your battery power, but can be repelled with the flashlight. Once Orville decloaks during a charge, the shocker will be used to deactivate him. The next character that I would like to discuss is Rockstar Chica. Bringing back the wet floor sign from Ultimate Custom Night, my idea for Rockstar Chica's mechanics is that the position of her static can actually be manipulated by moving the wet floor sign, which can be picked up by pressing and holding down on it and dragging it across the screen. Bringing it close to Rockstar Chica's static will cause the static to move away from the sign. The wet floor sign will also need to be held during Rockstar Chica's haywires, as you will need to stare at her while holding the sign towards her. The main goal of the encounter is to position the static across a large X on the floor, which indicates the only area where Rockstar Chica is affected by the shocker. When Rockstar Chica decloaks on the X, the shocker must be used to deactivate her. Shocking her when she is not on the X will have no effect on her. The next character that I would like to discuss is Scrap Baby. The introduction of mixed reality environments, with Glitchtrap's inclusion, has greatly expanded the potential of Special Delivery's gameplay and has allowed me to be more creative with my ideas than in part 1. The first character whose idea will involve a mixed reality environment is Scrap Baby. My idea is that, when deciding to confront Scrap Baby, you will be transported to a room reminiscent of the salvage room from Pizzeria Simulator, where the encounter will be a recreation of the salvage sections from that game. A deactivated Scrap Baby will be sitting at the other side of a table, while your side will have a cassette player and a sheet of paper. The cassette player will play 5 different audio prompts, while the sheet of paper is used to record the animatronics responses. Simply tapping on a box will place a tick in it, though the boxes that you tick will not have any effect on the encounter itself. In between prompts, Scrap Baby's position may change, with her eventually attacking you if she gets too close. The shocker can be used to return her to a neutral state, though using it more than 3 times will result in a decrease in your rewards, just like in Pizzeria Simulator. However, rather than earning less money, your penalty in Special Delivery will be less parts and remnant, as well as a lower chance of unlocking Scrap Baby's plush suit or CPU. Borrowing slightly from my outdated idea for Glitchtrap, once all 5 audio prompts have been played and all 5 results have been documented, Scrap Baby will be free to salvage and the encounter will end. Just like Glitchtrap and any other animatronics whose ideas will involve mixed reality environments, Scrap Baby's CPU will only be compatible with her and any potential skins for her. The next character that I would like to discuss is Rockstar Freddy. Once again borrowing from Ultimate Custom Night, my idea for Rockstar Freddy's mechanics is that, throughout the encounter, Faz coins will randomly appear in the environment, similarly to Remnant. Drawing them in with the flashlight will increase your Faz coin total, as evidenced by a counter in the top right corner of your screen. Rather than haywire, Rockstar Freddy will instead occasionally decloak and request 5 Faz coins, eventually attacking you if he is not paid in time. However, the timing will be much stricter than it was in Ultimate Custom Night. Also, you must have at least 5 Faz coins in order to use the shocker to deactivate Rockstar Freddy when he decloaks during a charge. The next character that I would like to discuss is Dreadbear. This is the second instance where my idea for a character's mechanics involves a mixed reality environment, as, upon deciding to confront Dreadbear, you will be transported to a dimly lit laboratory, reminiscent of his minigame from Curse of Dreadbear. From there, the encounter will be an adaptation of that exact stage, with you needing to calibrate Dreadbear's brain module by matching the correct brain regions, size, and neural feedback loop to the blueprints provided. However, one difference from the original stage that this encounter will possess is the power management. In the original stage, the power would occasionally cut off, disabling all of your equipment. You would need to pull a lever in order to reboot everything, but it could only be used 4 times before triggering Dreadbear's jump scare. However, in this adaptation, a power meter will gradually decline throughout the encounter, with Dreadbear eventually attacking you once it reaches 0%. Throughout the encounter, you must periodically shock a hydro tank for a few seconds in order to increase the meter. However, overloading it will also result in a jump scare. Once the brain module has been fully calibrated, it must be placed within Dreadbear's head. If the module has been calibrated incorrectly, then Dreadbear will attack you. However, if the calibration has been carried out correctly, then Dreadbear will be deactivated and the encounter will end. The next character that I would like to discuss is Pig Patch. Unfortunately, I was unable to formulate a particularly unique mechanic for Pig Patch, mainly because I just find him to be the most uninteresting of the mediocre melodies. Similarly to Balloon Boy's balloon sounds, Pig Patch's footsteps will be replaced with banjo strums. However, as a reference to Bonnie's parts and service stage from Help Wanted, Pigpatch's charges will be signified by an out-of-tune banjo strum. Pigpatch's haywires and charges will be handled similarly to most other special delivery animatronics, with the timing on his haywires being fairly lenient and the shocker being required to deactivate him during a charge. The next character that I would like to discuss is Candy Cadet. My idea is that Candy Cadet has been added to the Fazbear Funtime service as a mobile candy dispenser, similarly to his role in Pizzeria Simulator. Upon reaching your house, Candy Cadet will offer candy to you, but will immediately break down after a few seconds. In order to reactivate him, you must match up the colors on his head and torso lights to the configuration featured on a blueprint provided to you, similarly to the first phase of Dreadbear's encounter. However, to add to the tension, a recording of one of Candy Cadet's stories will play, with him eventually attacking you once it has finished, meaning that you are essentially on a time limit to repair him. Upon matching all 17 of Candy Cadet's lights, you must give him a shock to reactivate him. If the lights are matched incorrectly, then he will attack you. However, if all of his lights have been matched correctly, then Candy Cadet will provide you with candy and the encounter will end. Even though my idea for Candy Cadet does not involve a mixed reality environment, his CPU would still be exclusive to him and any potential skins of him, due to new animations being required. The next character that I would like to discuss is Yendo. My idea for Yendo is a recreation of the Funtime Auditorium from Sister Location and Help Wanted, in another mixed reality environment. While other people may assign this idea to Funtime Foxy, I honestly prefer the idea of Funtime Foxy's mechanics involving showtime from Ultimate Custom Night. However, the Funtime Auditorium idea would still work very well for Yendo, due to his Easter egg appearance in that stage in Sister Location. Anyway, upon deciding to confront Yendo, you will be transported to the pitch-black Funtime Auditorium, through which you must navigate towards the exit. The shocker and flashlight will both be removed and replaced with a flash beacon that can be used to light up the room for a split second. However, it must be used sparingly, as a single use will drain 10% of your battery power. Throughout the encounter, Yendo will wander across the room, and will attack you if you bump into him. If you catch sight of Yendo while using the flash beacon, then carefully attempt to maneuver around him. If you manage to traverse the auditorium successfully, then you will reach the exit, which is surrounded by red tiles, signifying a safe zone. Just as you are about to leave, Yendo will attempt to charge towards you, but will be deactivated upon stepping on the red tiles surrounding the exit. Even though my idea for Yendo's mechanics involves a mixed reality environment, his CPU would still be compatible with other animatronics, since no new animations would be required, with the animatronics haywire animations being used when they are uncovered by the flash beacon. The next character that I would like to discuss is Rockstar Bonnie. Just like in Ultimate Custom Night, he may occasionally lose his guitar, requiring you to quickly find it within a short time limit. However, unlike Mangle's parts, the amount of times that you will need to do this is completely random. Interestingly, one of the game's unused Faz facts declares that Rockstar Bonnie was constructed with parts from the original Bonnie, following his destruction at the hands of William Afton in the minigames of Five Nights at Freddy's 3. As a result, my idea for Rockstar Bonnie's haywires combines elements of Springtrap and Toy Bonnie's haywires, whilst also tweaking them to make them slightly more unique. When Rockstar Bonnie haywires, you must always stare at him, regardless of his eye color. However, if his eyes turn red, then you must equip the Freddy mask until the haywire ends. When Rockstar Bonnie finally decloaks during a charge, the shocker must be used to deactivate him. The next character that I would like to discuss is Helpy. Originally, I intended for Helpy to just be a distraction included in Music Man's mechanics, since his small size may make it difficult for him to stand as his own character. However, during Dorko's interview with Kieran, the CEO of Illumix, Helpy was actually confirmed for special delivery, along with Funtime Foxy and the Glamrock animatronics. Even though I will not be discussing ideas for the Glamrocks, since Security Breach has yet to be released, I have now decided to come up with mechanics for Helpy as well. As I previously mentioned, Due to Helpy's small size, I struggled to see him standing on his own as a new character. However, since I was able to come up with ideas for Bonbon and Bonnet in part 1, then I should certainly be able to come up with ideas for Helpy as well. Ultimately, I came up with a really interesting mechanic for him, which is yet another idea that involves a mixed reality environment. Upon deciding to confront Helpy, you will be transported to an abandoned Fazbear entertainment warehouse, filled with run-down attractions from Pizzeria Simulator. Instead of fighting Helpy, you must complete one of 3 available minigames in order to win the encounter. The available minigames will include the discount ball pit, the carnival hoops, and the riding rockets, each of which will function identically to their forms in Pizzeria Simulator's mobile version. For the discount ball pit, you need to score at least 600 points in 5 rounds. For the carnival hoops, you must score 20 hoops within 30 seconds. And for the riding rockets, you must survive 3 rounds of pizza wheels. Failure to complete the chosen objective will result in a jump scare. However, completing the chosen objective will cause Helpy to jump up and down in excitement and the encounter will end. Also, I think that it would be hilarious if Helpy's lawyer attire or any of his costumes from Help Wanted were included as skins for him.
I've fallen, and I can't get up!
The next character that I would like to discuss is Nedbear. Even though I find Nedbear to be about as uninteresting as Pig Batch, I was able to come up with a slightly more interesting mechanic for the former, since he appears to be the most shoddily designed of the mediocre melodies. Because of this, Nedbear will be one of the more erratic animatronics, with an extremely high chance of haywiring. Due to his faulty wiring, you must always stare at him during a haywire, even though he always has red eyes. Just like Circus Baby, Nedbear will also be able to haywire during a charge, though he will have a much higher likelihood of doing so. Once Nedbear decloaks during a charge, the shocker must be used to deactivate him. The next character that I would like to discuss is Rockstar Foxy. His haywires will be handled similarly to Springtrap's haywires, though you must focus on his parrot instead of his eye color. If the parrot is still perched on his shoulder, then you must stare at him. However, if the parrot is missing, then you have only a few seconds to find and pick it up. The parrot will also function similarly to Ballora's mini arenas, as it will occasionally block your screen until you shake it away. Finally, like most of the Pizzeria Simulator characters, my idea for Rockstar Foxy will also involve some of his mechanics from Ultimate Custom Night. On somewhat rare occasions, Rockstar Foxy's parrot may appear on the floor, outside of a haywire. Concerning its rarity, I would say that it would be as rare as the distorted Freddy poster, one of the more common Easter eggs in the first game. If the parrot appears on the floor, then you can either tap on it as if it were the result of a haywire, or give it a shock. Choosing the latter option will summon Rockstar Foxy, who has an equal chance of either helping you or attacking you, though the latter will be preceded by a warning. Just like in Ultimate Custom Night,
Yar, you win some, you lose some.
if Rockstar Foxy offers help to you, then you will be allowed to choose one of 4 different boosts. In this game, your options will include 10 extra Faz coins, 5% extra battery power, 50 extra remnant, or a random lure. Once Rockstar Foxy decloaks during a charge, the shocker must be used to deactivate him. The next character that I would like to discuss is Scraptrap. My idea for Scraptrap is a recreation of the office segments from Pizzeria Simulator, in another mixed reality environment. Upon being transported to Pizzeria Simulator's office when deciding to confront Scraptrap, you must complete the same tasks that you would during a normal run of Pizzeria Simulator, although the list of supplies will be cut down from 5 to 3. You must keep track of Scraptrap's location by checking the vent radar and listening for the sound of vent crawling. The closer Scraptrap is, the louder the sound will become. If you see Scraptrap climbing towards you through one of the two vents on either side of you, then you must give him a shock in order to send him backwards. Completing all of your tasks will actually unlock a hidden vent in the ceiling, which Scraptrap will immediately drop through into your office. At that moment, you will have only 1 second to quickly shock Scraptrap before he attacks you. Failure to shock Scraptrap in time will result in a jump scare, while shocking him will result in a win, ending the encounter. The next character that I would like to discuss is Bidibab, involving yet another mixed reality environment. My idea for Bidibab is a recreation of Mangle's vent repair from Help Wanted. I did consider a recreation of the under the desk section from Sister Location, but I felt that it would be too simple and unengaging for augmented reality. Anyway, upon deciding to confront Bidibab, you will be transported to a ventilation system that you must perform maintenance within, while being pursued by Bidibab. The mechanics will be identical to those in Help Wanted, though Bidibab will now be deterred by closing vent openings until you hear a knocking sound. The doors will be closed by shocking generators next to them, that will close them for 5 seconds. Similarly to Mangle's vent repair, there will also be an extra animatronic to contend with. However, the second animatronic in Mangle's vent repair, Shadow Mangle, behaves identically to Mangle in Bidibab's version of the stage. The second animatronic will be Electrobab, who will act as a distraction by occasionally draining your battery power, requiring you to shock him, just like in the Sister Location custom night. Once all 3 tasks have been completed, Bidibab will attempt to crawl towards you once more, only to be deactivated upon reaching the vent opening. Of course, if Bidibab was to be included in special delivery, then Electrobab would be an obvious candidate for a potential skin. The next character that I would like to discuss is Happy Frog. Despite not involving a mixed reality environment, my idea for Happy Frog's mechanics is still fairly interesting. While researching facts for my 255 Nights at Freddy's Facts video, I learned that Happy Frog is immune to the heater in Ultimate Custom Night because real-life frogs are cold-blooded. I did some further research and learned that cold-blooded animals are unable to maintain their own body temperature and rely on heat from the environment, which has served as the basis for my idea for Happy Frog's mechanics. Continuing with the idea of the mediocre melodies being poorly engineered, a design flaw will result in Happy Frog animatronics relying on external heat in order to remain active. Upon starting an encounter with Happy Frog, there will be 3 heaters included within your environment. In order to decrease the temperature to defeat Happy Frog, you must shock each of the heaters for a few seconds, overloading and deactivating them. Once all 3 heaters have been deactivated, the temperature will quickly decrease, as evidenced by a thermometer included in your HUD. The temperature begins at 60 degrees Fahrenheit, much like previous games, but must drop to below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, the lowest temperature that a frog can survive in. The temperature will roughly take 1 minute and 30 seconds to reach 32 degrees Fahrenheit, and, during that time, you must contend with the screen constantly freezing, as well as Happy Frog's haywires and attempts to restart the heaters. The ice is thawed by shaking the screen. Happy Frog's haywires are dealt with by looking away, and she must be shocked when attempting to restart the heaters. When the temperature finally drops below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, Happy Frog will decloak and attempt to charge at you, only to be frozen in her tracks. The next character that I would like to discuss is LChip, with a much simpler mechanic than the last idea. Just like Funtime Chica, interference will be replaced by a mechanic from Ultimate Custom Night. In this case, the replacement will be the advertisements for LChip's Fiesta Buffet, which will play loud, distracting music until you press the large skip button that accompanies them. Another detail that I would add is that LChip will occasionally play a short tune on his mandolin, a mirror to Freddy's music box. Outside of those additions, LChip would function like a normal special delivery animatronic, with you needing to look away from his haywires and shock him when he decloaks during a charge. The next character that I would like to discuss is Mr. Hippo, with a somewhat more humorous mechanic that references his laid-back, chatty personality. Instead of attacking you, Mr. Hippo will ask you to help him complete a quiz in a newspaper. Appropriately, the quiz will be based on 5 Nights at Freddy's trivia, with 10 multiple choice questions. In order to succeed, you must get at least 7 correct answers, as a mild reference to the Build-A-Mangle stage from Curse of Dreadbear. Just like in that stage, failure to score at least 70% will result in a jump scare, while scoring at least 70% will net you a win. Of course, should you die to Mr. Hippo, you will be subjected to a long, droning monologue about Mr. Hippo's daily life. However, unlike in Ultimate Custom Night, there will be an option to skip the diatribe. Even though my idea for Mr. Hippo's mechanics does not involve a mixed reality environment, his CPU would still be exclusive to him and any potential skins for him, due to new animations being required, just like with my idea for Candy Cadet. The next character that I would like to discuss is who would be the final character of this video. Glitchtrap. Originally, I did not plan on coming up with ideas for Glitchtrap, since I do not think that he is very likely to make it into special delivery. However, if I stuck to that claim, then it would be obvious that I had not learned anything from the Golden Freddy fiasco. To be honest, Glitchtrap was one of the more confusing characters to create a mechanic for, since he is a completely digital entity, and it is unclear if the in-universe scenarios of special delivery take place in reality or actually on mobile phones. However, I did ultimately manage to concoct a very interesting mechanic that can work regardless of the game's actual setting. In order to summon Glitchtrap, you must defeat 16 Springtrap animatronics, symbolic of gathering the 16 tapes in Help Wanted. Upon defeating the 16th Springtrap, the animatronic will twitch and convulse violently, until his eyes turn purple and the screen is taken over by harsh, purple static. After a few seconds, the screen will return to normal, but Glitchtrap will appear a few feet away from you, and quickly inch his way towards, intent on taking control of your mind. In order to prevent this, you must shock a nearby music box for 5 seconds to activate it, and you must flip 5 switches. If you are unsuccessful, then the screen will be covered with harsh, purple static, before eventually fading into the game over screen. However, if you successfully activate all of the equipment in time, then Glitchtrap will fade away in a cloud of purple smoke. Just like Fsfsk, Glitchtrap will not be a normal workshop animatronic, due to the unique conditions surrounding his encounter. Now, that would have been the ending of the video, but there are actually 2 characters from the novels who I would like to discuss ideas for, Fetch and Rafo. If Illumix were ever to include characters from the Fazbear Frights series, then these are the only 2 characters that I could see working as their own characters, rather than as skins. Even though Fazbear Frights characters may be extremely unlikely to make it into special delivery, I have still decided to come up with mechanics for these 2 characters, since they are 2 of the most unique animatronics in the Fazbear Frights series. Beginning with Fetch, rather than speaking, he will communicate with you through slang-ridden phone texts. Just like in his own story. Throughout the encounter, he will attempt to sabotage your equipment in various ways, such as draining 10% of your battery power, covering the screen with intense interference, or activating the flashlight or shocker at random. His haywires will be handled similarly to Springtrap's haywires, with you needing to stare at him with white eyes and look away from him with red eyes. However, unlike Springtrap, he can only perform 1 haywire at a time. When Fetch decloaks during a charge, the shocker must be used to deactivate him. Finally, let's discuss the last animatronic of this video, Rafo. This was one of the more interesting cases, since it is unclear if Rafo is even an animatronic or just a person wearing a costume. Another inconsistency to deal with was his size, since his own story Bunny Call describes him as a human-sized animatronic, while the front cover depicts him as toy-sized. Ultimately, my idea for Rafo's mechanics is based upon the assumption that he is indeed an animatronic, but can still work, regardless of his size. Much like my idea for Fetch, my idea for Rafo is based upon his actions in his own Fazbear Frights story. Upon deciding to confront Rafo, you will be transported to a log cabin in the middle of a forest, being the last of my ideas to utilize a mixed reality environment. Just like in Bunny Call, you will need to keep Rafo out of the cabin from 5 AM to 6 AM, which is roughly 2 minutes and 30 seconds in real time. He will attempt to enter the cabin through 4 different entrance points: the front door, the kitchen window, the trapdoor, and the loft window. You will be able to travel between different sections of the cabin by pressing a teleport button, similarly to Five Nights at Freddy's 4. In order to track Rafo's location, you must listen for the sound of his cymbals. If the sound becomes louder when looking a certain direction, then that means that Rafo is about to enter through that entrance point. Once the clock finally hits 6 AM, the shocker will become available to use. Rafo will make one final attempt to enter the cabin and you must use the shocker to deactivate him. And with that said, that will conclude part 2 of ideas for special delivery mechanics. Thank you for watching this video. I hope that you have found some of my ideas to be quite interesting. To be honest, I am more pleased with this video than part 1. Since I was able to be more creative with my ideas. I may consider doing a part 3 in the future, where I update some of my previous ideas to be more unique. However, this video may be slightly unlikely, since not all of my ideas would necessarily need an update. If I were to do a part 3, the only characters that I would really consider updating my ideas for would be Nightmare Fredbear, Nightmarian, and Ennard. Concerning my next 2 videos, I will try to get 20 obscure Transformers characters finished by the latter half of February, while I will try to get 255 Nights at Freddy's facts finished by the first half of March, since I am trying to stick to a production schedule of 2 videos per month. With all of my points addressed, that will be all for this video. Please like the video if you enjoyed it. Feel free to share your own opinions in the comments section. And please subscribe to my channel if you would like to stay up to date with my newest uploads. Thank you for watching.